This is your Monday confession. Coming to you from Scala Radio. If you have your own tale, it's confessions@scalaradio.co.uk. And into the collective, we welcome our judges. That's Judge Jack.
Hello.
Judge Jody.
Hello.
And Judge Jeeves.
Hello.
See? It's the alliteration is quite
beautiful.
Poetic.
The best letter.
I think the best we've ever had. No? Okay, I should tell you that Judge Jody may well be a little bit harsh because she's had one of those weekends.
It's been a fun weekend. I think I'm not forgiving today. You called me a pushover last week. I'm determined to not be.
Is that right?
Yes.
Perhaps do it on merit, eh, Jodie?
Eh?
Hey.
I should just give you a slight warning about this confession.
Oh.
If you're eating,
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
if you're having your 11s, or if you're preparing your Monday lunch,
Right.
then you might find this a little bit of a... There might be moments where you want to look away.
Oh, no.
Just saying. It comes from the daughter-in-law. That's how it's signed. This is a collective confession. It's time the conspiracy of silence was lifted. I married into a family consisting of grandparents, 2 of these. In fact, my in-laws. The children... These were, of course, now adults, 6 of us, 3 couples, and 2 grandchildren, including, let's call him, Little Peter. Back in 1995, the grandparents retired. What could we get them for a suitable gift, we wondered. We lived some 70 or 80 miles apart from each other, so only tended to gather for Christmas or Easter or notable birthdays. I forget who, but someone mooted the idea of a grand family holiday. Our family gatherings, don't we all just love them, tended to go fairly smoothly, apart from occasionally smothered grumbles and the odd raised voice. A week together in one house. What could go wrong? One thing you should know is that Grandma, whilst not posh, has rather high standards, particularly when it comes to cleanliness and food hygiene. Also, my brother-in-law, Big Greg, has a large Labrador called Zach. I hope you're making notes of this cast.
It's
Yeah.
a long cast.
Well, the
isn't it?
Labrador is Zach, Big Greg is the brother-in-law, and Little Peter, age 5, terrified of dogs, especially, as it turned out, big bouncy Labradors called Zach. Now, a suggestion was made by Little Peter's parents that perhaps a dogless holiday would be best. Maybe Zach should be parked with friends for a week or 2, huh?
Oh.
But no, we were going to go to a remote corner of Snowdonia, and Big Greg wanted lots of walkies up mountains with Zach. So Zach came. Now, first evening was fairly quiet, since we all turned blind eyes when Zach, entering the dining room, casually cocked his leg up against the kitchen door and marked this territory as his. Indoors. Just as well Grandma hasn't arrived yet, we all thought. Puddles were wiped, and Zach was put to bed in disgrace in the scullery, the small room off the kitchen, from the French esquillerie, meaning the office of the servant in charge of plates. I just added that in case you
nice.
wanted to know.
Yeah, good.
Thanks, Sam.
That's useful, thank you.
This was a useful room where we'd put our boot boxes and hung our coats. Grandparents arrived and were greeted, and we all eventually headed to bed. The next morning, Big Greg rose early. Thankfully, so did Little Peter's daddy, or I wouldn't have heard about what happened next. He was only the witness. After dressing, Big Greg went to let Zach out for his morning ablutions. Now, Zach had heard the excitement of the grandparents' arrival the night before, and with the added promise of nearby countryside smells and an unfamiliar environment, it had all become too much for him. And at some point in the night, he could await no longer for the great outdoors, if you get my meaning.
Ooh.
And let me add, Zach is a big dog. Big Greg strode through the kitchen and threw open the scullery door, crying, "Zach, walkies!" But Zach had already heard his master approaching and, needing no encouragement, leapt up onto his hind legs, ready to pounce on his daddy with a big doggy hug. Just as Big Greg threw open the door, Zach was in midair and happily planted his front paws onto Big Greg's shoulders, front paws which had been running around in the scullery, which was by now liberally smothered. Big Greg, partly in the scullery by now, took a step back in surprise and slipped on the rather slimy floor and landed flat on his back in the middle of it all.
Oh, my gosh.
This is suitably vague. Now, this scene had only been witnessed by little Peter's daddy, and by the time the rest of us came down for breakfast, there was a strange silence, with Big Greg, looking damp-haired and freshly showered, cooking up a big family breakfast for us all. Zach was happily bounding around the open-plan kitchen diner, which smelled strongly of disinfectant. It didn't quite cover up another smell, a smell not quite as clean. Little Peter was clinging onto his daddy's neck with all his might, and Grandma was sniffing suspiciously at the very strange, unpleasant smell pervading the whole scene, which no one mentioned. The smell was really off-putting to all of us. 10 of us sat down for a big cooked breakfast, and many of us couldn't manage it. Not to worry, Zach was nearby and all too eager to scoff everybody's leftovers and unwanted bits of food. Now, I did warn you about all this. Finally, the rather awkward breakfast was finished, and just as we started to relax, there was a strange doggy retching noise. Now, I have to say, I have taken out a lot here. Zach, sitting on the floor near Grandma with the high standards, was on all fours, heaving away, and up came everything which he had just consumed merely moments later. It landed on the carpeted floor right next to Grandma, and a little bit on her shoes. There was a stunned silence. Well, Grandma's face was a picture of disapproval, but Big Greg was undeterred. He proclaimed cheerfully, "Don't worry, I'll hoover it all up after breakfast." Yes, that's right. So, daughter-in-law says, "For me and on behalf of all of us, this is the time to ask forgiveness, not from Grandma, who will always find something to worry about, or from Big Greg, for dining out on this story for many years, but from the owners and the future hirers of this property. Indeed, for anyone who had to use the hoover. For to our shame, not one of us protested at the idea of Big Greg using the hoover for such a purpose, and not one of us offered to clean or empty it afterwards." I just said, there was a warning. That's it. Okay, we can all relax now. Okay, so let's fight. Judge Jody, she goes first on the daughter-in-law.
Daughter-in-law. I think it's not okay. You didn't offer to help. You're all just you're not all selfish, but I think at the time you should have all kind of teamed together.
Mucked in.
Yeah,
even.
mucked in.
Yeah.
For want of a better phrase.
Yeah. The poor dog, he was just trying to have a good holiday, and you trapped him in the basement and you fed him breakfast. So it's not his fault. Poor Zach. So no, I don't forgive you.
It was the scullery, not the basement.
Sorry,
anyway.
scullery.
Judge Jeeves.
Completely forgiven as the person who's had many Labradors over the years and have come down to the various and many presents they leave you, and the way that they can bring things up at a moment's notice.
Yes.
Without there's nothing you can do about it. It's Labrador behaviour. It's all forgiven.
Yes, I think basically it's always the owner's fault.
It's always the
Yeah,
owner's fault.
that's true.
Absolutely every time.
Judge Jack.
I got a bit confused in that story because there was a point where I confused the names and I was like, who was the dog again? Was
Zach
it Greg
is the
or was
dog.
it Zach? So it's just as well, because otherwise it doesn't work, does
If
it? But
Big Greg had
if it
done
was
it,
just the
we'd have more
dog who did it,
Yeah.
then it was
Yeah.
okay. I can definitely forgive, because I think Labradors, having had many Labradors myself...
But it's not about
you
the
can't-
dog.
But he can't
about
help
the mess.
it, can he? He's expressing himself and his love for his family. He couldn't help it. They could have all mucked in and made a bad situation slightly better. So
Okay.
I can definitely forgive the dog.
Yes, if it had been Big Greg had been locked in the scullery, that would have been an entirely different picture.
Totally different story.
So you've heard from the judges in the studio. If you want to have your say on daughter-in-law's confession 64100, you can tweet us at Scala Radio, and the email is simon@scalaradio.com. It's a good thing. And standing by for your comment, 64100, first word is Scala. Plus, if you have a confession, send it in over the weekend, because we'd love to have a reader. Then we'd like to put it out next week. Confessions@scalaradio.co.uk. Judge Jody is in the house.
Hello.
Whether she's going to make a lot of sense or not, I don't know.
Who knows?
Bit of a late night, a lot of fast food, fast food dinner, a fast food breakfast. It's the kind of thing you can do when you're...
Just once in a while. It's a treat. It's a Friday treat.
So Judge Jody is here, Judge Jack is here.
Hello. It was just porridge this morning, Simon. I've got to say.
Excellent. And Rick Radio, who's got to that stage in life where you have to be careful what you eat for breakfast.
Well, I do. Can I just pick up a point on the biscuits? The oldest biscuit surely's got to be the Garibaldi. That's been around since about 1807. And ironically, Garibaldi was actually born in Nice.
Yeah, but the Bath Oliver dates from...
So I'm just chucking it out
You
there.
came in
just chucking it
prepared.
out there.
The Bath Oliver dates from 1750, which beats your Garibaldi.
Okay,
Ooh.
okay.
But I'd rather have a Garibaldi because at least it's got a bit of interest.
Yeah, it's
in
got
there.
those kind of freckly bits in.
Raisins.
Raisins, that's what they're called.
Sort of sounds like a chap, isn't it? Gary Baldy. It could be two names there.
It could be.
Garibaldi was a guy. Garibaldi
Well, I know,
was an
but it
Italian.
sounds like. Oh, well, I know, but it sounds like it could be somebody from the East End. Gary Baldy,
What,
Mr.
Gary,
Baldy.
Gary would know.
Good old Gary. It's remade.
Let's move on.
Many years ago, I remember doing a feature. I can't remember whose idea it was, where every old record that we played on the show was by someone with no hair. I wonder whose idea that was.
What a terrible idea
What was
that
it called?
It's stuck in our minds so clearly, isn't it?
It was. Anyway, here comes tonight's, this morning's tale, and it comes from Dan. Thank you, Dan. Father Simon and the Confessions Collective. It's been a while since my last confession. Actually, if I'm being honest, I've never confessed before. So you're obviously the best place to start. My confession takes us back to when I was about 14. And it's worth noting that my friend Will was and still is quite forgetful. Actually, make that incredibly forgetful. One Saturday afternoon, myself and Will were doing what all young teens do on the weekend. Mostly nothing, but it felt great. We went to the park, spent our seemingly endless money on sweets, and then went to hang out back at Will's house. And this is where the problem arose. Will, like many times before, had forgotten to pick up his door key, leaving us stranded on the streets with no more money and no way to get in. Or was there? Having spent a lot of time at Will's, I had noticed on an occasion that the upstairs bathroom window was often left open. I hadn't thought about this much until now. However, as we stood stranded with nowhere to go, slowly starting to worry how we will survive on the mean streets of our quaint little town, I had an idea. I explained to Will that his first floor bathroom window was left open and that thanks to the ground floor extension that had been built from the side of the back of the house, it was possible to get around to the window in question. He didn't believe me, even though it was his house. Anyway, he didn't believe me, so it was down to me to show him. Using a bin to give me enough room to mount the wall which borders the property, I could then climb onto the extension's flat roof. I swiftly ran to the back of the house and found that the window was indeed open. Having to climb in head first, I was just about big enough to fit in. I was just about okay as a slim 14-year-old child to squeeze through. Once I was in, I went downstairs and I let Will into the house. Of course, he was impressed, and so was I. I showed Will how I could do it. And should we need to do it again, this was the routine that we had to follow. And then we went to the fridge, because that's what you did when you were 14. Over the coming months, Will would often forget his keys, but that didn't bother us anymore because we knew now how to get into the house. And Will now knew how to get in because of my agility and my subterfuge. It was all down to me. It was all going well until the day Will had just climbed through the window, rather ironically, to collect his keys and some money before heading down the road to the Chippy. When, as we ordered our food, we were passed by 3 police cars with full blues and twos. I'd hate to be who they're after, said Will. And as you can probably guess, what happened next was the coppers were indeed at Will's house with police dogs because a neighbour had called the police after seeing someone entering through a bathroom window. Will's mum had been contacted and the police were searching the house for intruders and anything that might have been stolen. What did we do? We looked as innocent as we could. We were sweet-looking boys, nice parents, law-abiding family, but obviously we looked shifty as hell. So it went like this. Dan, Sonny, can you help us? No, Officer Dibble.
Of course.
Now, Dan, are you sure? Yes, Officer Dibble. They gave up on me. What about you, Will? Can you help us, laddie? They said. What? What's funny about that? It's just
all of your
evil, grinning
voices of authority
policeman.
are the same.
yes, unless they're priestly, in which case it's Mr. Yateman from Dad's Army. What about you, Will? Can you help us, laddie? Well, to be honest, Will had always wanted to be a police officer, and he couldn't live with the guilt, so he sang like a canary. It was all me. I'd forgotten my keys. I saw the window was open, so I climbed in. I'm ever so sorry. I thought of everything. He thought of nothing. It's not him. It's all me. I was in shock. He took all of the blame. He didn't dob me in at all, where it was actually me who'd shown him how to break into his house. Will's mum went, quite rightly, nuts. He was grounded for a month, and he had to go and apologise to the neighbour who had thought he was breaking and entering. And it goes without saying the window was never left open again. But Simon. Not only am I seeking forgiveness from the neighbour, Will's mum and the police, but also from Will, because he never dobbed me in, and it was me that came up with the plan in the first place. But I'm awaiting your judgment. P.S. If this helps, I'm loving Scala Radio. It's about
Brownie
time
points.
that classical music was celebrated in a new, fresh way. Thanks. A little bit desperate there, Dan, at the end. In fact, it's Desperate Dan.
I quite
harsh,
liked
Simon.
it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
That was
nice,
very kind.
it's a nice thing. It's just that I think he's
Too
chucking
beggy.
it in there because he's desperate. Judge Jody. with it.
I think that's quite a nice story, Dan. Dan and Will, what a lovely friendship. Just shows how much Will respected you, and I hope you're still friends because he sounds like a good one. I forgive you.
Push over.
It's a Friday.
Judge Jack.
I'm feeling much the same way. As a young child, I remember getting locked in the bathroom of a local pub. We're talking, I was like 4. I wasn't, 15, 16. But these were in the days where you went with your mum, and of course I got locked in the cubicle. So my dad had to come in and dangle over the door and lift me out. But of course this was in the ladies. So we were in a very difficult position when people came in and we had to explain that there was a young boy who was stuck in there and who had to be rescued. So stories of windows open and people having to be, rescued, coming in, coming out, I can totally sympathise with it. I can forgive.
Rick Radio.
Yeah, forgiven as well. Good story about friendship and integrity, and I hope Will went on to become a policeman. And actually, the
Yeah.
delight of squeezing through a window headfirst is something which is marvellous.
When was the last time you did that?
Well, it was a long time ago.
Were you breaking into your own house or someone else's?
It's my own.
Okay. If you want to comment on this, people's verdict on Dan's confession is 64-100. The first word is Scala, and your confession will be welcome. confessions@scalaradio.co.uk. And this is the most dangerous piece of music that we're playing today. I've played it before, and every single time I play it, it drives me crazy. I love it a lot, but this will not leave your head for a week.